بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وإمام المرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وجعلنا من خير أمة سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. We seek Allah's protection from knowledge that does not benefit, from a heart that has no khushu, from a nafs that's never had enough, from an eye that does not tear, and from a dua that's not heard. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, everyone's doing well. As we do normally, we start off by it's a reminder for myself, everyone and myself included, the people of Palestine. Please continue to remember them in your du'as. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them, grant them relief. Regardless of how long it's been, and probably, there's not as much being said in the media, but the suffering is still taking place. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them. Please remember them in your du'as. It is going to now become more and more difficult in terms of helping in charity wise, but inshallah keep trying and fighting for that. If you've been following the news, you know why I'm saying that. But from our side, like I said, whatever we can do to save your innocent lives in terms of any charity work, raising to the relevant parties, and the bare minimum is obviously making dua for them. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them. So we continue with the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and lessons that we can learn. Now, last week was like well, I mentioned that it's going to be off topic, but speaking about the 5 Abdullahs, I think it was a good time to, as we've kind of come across them all at this point, mention them as they kind of put together and as a title for them, 5 Abdullahs. So inshallah that's been beneficial. Obviously I could not do it justice. We have limited time, so it's almost like if you take that hour per Abdullah, that's still not enough. I did all 5 in one session, but also what I mentioned was that most of them, I suppose there's a lot to talk about after the Prophet ﷺ left this temporary world. And what we tend to do is we try to focus wherever we are at in the Seerah. So that's the kind of way I've done this as we've gone along. I've not tried jumping ahead. Even if it's just like a reference, I would probably give, but don't give any details, don't give any spoilers, I can say. So yeah, there is a lot to talk about them after the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So maybe inshallah in the future sometime, Allah give us tawfiq, we can kind of one by one some of these kind of great Sahaba, just do kind of some lessons on them, inshallah. Anyway, first of all, we need to complete the Seerah. Okay, so so what we got to is we spoke about the Qada Umrah Qada, the returning back. We spoke about the conversion of Khalid ibn Walid. Now what's going to happen is that so this is about 3 months after the Umrah pilgrimage. There's like a battle which, honestly speaking, it's not really mentioned much. Well, I say mentioned much, but it's not as popular. Okay, it's not as well known. Okay, but nevertheless, it's really important. Okay, no doubt everything is important, but you'll see why I say that. What happens and the kind of impact on it, on the Prophet ﷺ and how he felt. Okay, so 3 months after the Umrah pilgrimage, the Prophet ﷺ sends a peaceful delegation of 15 men to Syrian border to introduce Islam to the northern Arabian tribes. However, as the party kind of nears its destination, the group is ambushed and all but one man is killed. Okay, Now, around about the same time, the Prophet ﷺ sends a second letter to the Roman governor in Bostra, since the first one went unanswered. Okay, so the message, however, is intercepted by Ghassanid, who kind of sent a kind of stern warning to Medina by killing this messenger, so killing the Prophet ﷺ's messenger, and whose name was Harith ibn Umayyad. So what they do is they capture him, they torture him, even though kind of he tells them who he is, so what it is you're heading up north, and they kind of intercept. Okay, he tells them who he is, and even at those times you don't harm a messenger. You don't harm a messenger. It's something that's kind of gone through now, but continues. But you don't harm the messenger. But here, the chief himself kills the messenger. Okay. Now remember, the Ghassanids were kind of Hellenized Christians, Christian Arabs basically. So they were originally Kahlan Arabs who kind of left Yemen many kind of centuries ago. So they were up north. Okay. So they were more linked with the Romans because of the religion, okay, rather than to the Arabs, although they were kind of Arabs, but they were more linked to the Romans because of the religion. Okay, they were almost like, I don't know how to describe it, they kind of go to guys, when the Romans wanted something little kind of take place, I'll go take care of this, off they go, and they would do it. So that would mean that, the Romans would always kind of be there, they'd have their back, etc. Okay, and this is important because you'll see what happens, because when the news reaches Medina, the Prophet ﷺ kind of gathers an army of 3,000, okay, and he sends them, out. Now, Mu'atta was kind of the greatest battle in terms of numbers, okay, the greatest battle fought by the Muslims in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, so in the time of Prophet ﷺ, and it was to a certain extent, you can say, a kind of indication of things to come, because they would there would be, after the time of the Prophet ﷺ, certainly in the time of Sayyidina Umar, there would be some battles fought with the numbers, with kind of big numbers. Okay, so kind of big numbers. So Mu'atta is called Ghazwa. Okay, Ghazwa by scholars later on, so they called it Ghazwa. Even though the Prophet ﷺ does not participate. Okay, even though the Prophet ﷺ does not participate. Now, there's a few reasons. One is the size of the army. Okay, 3,000 men. It was, for the Muslims. And if you look at it, in the grand scheme of things, we're just talking about, within the Medinan period, the first battle, Badr, 313. From 313, now within a few years, you've jumped to 3,000. Okay, you can see how they've grown. So firstly, it was because of the size of the army, and second was the opposition. It's the only time in the life of the Prophet ﷺ that the Muslims face we call a non-Arab army. Okay, a non-Arab army. Now, so the Prophet ﷺ kind of sends out an army, and he says, look, go and see what the situation is. Okay, kind of go and engage, if you need to, and this is, like a 3,000 strong army, if you need to, so he goes, engage if you need to, whatnot, but go and see what the situation is. Okay, so what he does is he puts the army under the command, under the leadership of Sayyidina Zayd ibn Harith, okay, and he gives the armies kind of some unusual advice. Okay, advice is never given before. So what he says is that if Zayd is slain, then Ja'far ibn Abu Talib will take the banner. If Ja'far is slain, then Abdullah ibn Rawaha will take the banner. Okay, and if Abdullah ibn Rawaha is slain, then kind of choose a leader amongst yourselves. Okay, now one of those who went out in this 3,000 strong army was none other than Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid, who had just recently, so like less than 3 months ago, so if this 3 months after the Umrah, then he went after that, so it's less than 3 months ago, so a matter of a couple of months, has become Muslim. Okay, so he's become Muslim. So you've got this, Khalid ibn Walid in your back pocket, the kind of this great general of the Arabs, the great general of the Arabs. Why would you not put Khalid ibn Walid in charge of the army? But the Prophet ﷺ knew something here. He knew something, so kind of the army goes forth. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ hands over a white flag banner to Sayyidina Zayd that he made himself, and he accompanied them all the way to the what you call the farewell hill. Okay, so what used to happen is whenever they would go out for like an expedition, a battle, they would be seen off by the family members or whatnot, the rest of them, all the way up to the point it was like a small hill outside of Medina. Okay, small hill outside of Medina. That's where they would like kind of then climb up to on that hill and then wait until they disappear, and then they would return. And this is known as Saniyat al-Wada. Okay, the Valley of Wada. Okay, you probably heard it from the Nasheed Talal Badru Alayna. Okay, so Saniyat al-Wada. This is where kind of they would go up to. So that this time the Prophet ﷺ accompanied the army. Okay, all the way up to that point. Okay, and to see them off from there. Okay. Again, the kind of build up here is that look, something's going to happen here now. The Prophet ﷺ seeing that off, the Prophet ﷺ saying, okay, this is your leader. If he gets slain, then this is your leader. If he gets slain, then this is your leader. Well, wait a minute, he's never done that before. Why is he doing all this? Anyway, so obviously it was something the Prophet ﷺ knew. Okay. Now, what actually happens is there's this little incident that takes place involving, say, Abdullah ibn Abbas, we spoke about last week. So he had actually signed up to fight in the battle as well. But he was in kind of two minds. He was like, do I kind of set off with the army now? Or do I kind of wait until tomorrow? Tomorrow is Jummah, and I don't want to be missing Jummah with the Prophet ﷺ. So, or should I kind of stay, read Jummah with the Prophet ﷺ, then I'll set off and then I'll kind of catch up with them. Okay, so that's what he decides to do. He decides to do the second. So he reads Jummah and the Prophet ﷺ then sees him. And he says to him, well, didn't you sign up for the army? He says, yeah, Rasulullah, I'm going to be setting off now. I just wanted to read Jummah with you. And he said, you've sacrificed a greater reward, which is the Ghazwa. So if you had kind of set off with them, that's more of a reward for you. So you've kind of sacrificed a greater reward. Anyway, so what happens is the Ghassanians realize that the Muslim army is coming. Okay, so they contact the Byzantines, and the Byzantines happen to have a kind of legion, a full legion in that region. Okay, and so this kind of Italian kind of is sent out. So they seek the help of the Romans. So they send out. So along with, obviously they got their own as well. But anyway, the Romans kind of send out their kind of their army. Okay. Now when the Muslims arrive, which is at modern day Karak, or what's called Karak now, it's like Jordan. Okay, so when they arrive there, they find and the reports say an army. So the reports actually say an army of like 100,000 or 150,000. To be honest, I know you're probably pushing it. So again, the report's saying that, but the likelihood is probably wasn't that large. Okay, so but anyway, that's what the reports are saying. I just want to kind of put it out there that this is what the reports are saying, that it was about 100,000, 150,000, but likelihood it was probably not as many as that. Okay, probably not as many as that, because when you're going to consider the battlefield, etc., and all that, and the description that's given, likelihood it wasn't that much. Okay, but regardless of it, it was a large army. Okay, much larger than the Muslim army, Okay, it was certainly the largest army that the Muslims had ever seen. Okay, and this time around, you had highly trained Byzantines. Okay, these weren't your regular Bedouin fighters. These are kind of highly trained legions, kind of they were going to face. Okay, highly trained. So they weren't expecting this. Okay. There is actually a difference, because some turn around just to kind of, I suppose, spice things up. They say, oh, Heraclius actually himself participated. However, the strong position is that more likely that he did not, he didn't participate. And even in the future as well, actually, he never directly faced off against the Muslims. There are reports actually that his brother, though, he did participate in this battle. Okay, his brother did participate in this battle. So remember, we spoke about Heraclius as well, and he was like pushing towards, he actually wanted to become Muslim, although still he did not become Muslim, or he definitely announced to become a Muslim, but he did not face off against the Muslims. Okay, he did not face off against the Muslims. So what happens is when they kind of see this, actually there is kind of one reporter on the way, they get attacked by this small village, but they kind of Zayd does not want the distraction there, so he just continue. Okay, like a few arrows are fired, etc. And I think one person is martyred then, but I can't remember 100%. But there was like a few skirmishes there. So when they kind of see this army, they kind of withdraw a bit. Okay, they withdraw and they kind of, okay, hold up. Then we need to rethink things now here. Okay, we need to kind of think about this very carefully. And then they were saying, okay, what do we do? Okay, they were thinking that should we kind of let's wait here, let's send a message back to the Prophet ﷺ, and kind of wait up in the desert, etc. They can't follow us here, okay, because they need the kind of supply chains, etc., etc. So let's withdraw into the desert. They can't follow us in the desert. Let's send a message to the Prophet ﷺ, ask him how he wishes us to proceed, and how he wants to proceed, or does he want to kind of send reinforcements. Now you got to understand is that because how far they are, a messenger being sent and coming back again, that you're looking at least a couple of weeks. Okay, you're looking at least a couple of weeks. So we do meanwhile. So what happens is Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Rawaha, he kind of stands up, and he probably saw his destiny, so written before him, and he kind of stands and he says to all believers, what do we have to lose? Kind of, if we engage the enemy, we will gain one of two. We'll gain one of two blessings: victory or martyrdom. We should fight. So, what's kind of written on what he says, I swear by Allah that the very object which you are trying to avoid is the one you have set out to seeking. So you're trying to avoid martyrdom, but that's actually what you're seeking. Okay, martyrdom. In our fight, we don't count on number of soldiers or equipment, but rather on the faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored us with hasten to win either of the two, victory or martyrdom. And kind of his passion, because he was a poet, and we'll touch upon this a bit later, but he was a poet. So his kind of passion and the way he kind of delivered, he kind of got everyone, fired up and said, yeah, come on then. Let's go out, let's take them on. Okay? So they decided to go and fight. Okay, they decided to go and fight. So what happens is the armies line up, kind of the retreat to a place called Mu'atta, where this name kind of Battle of Mu'atta comes from. So they can't be kind of surrounded because there are mountains in the back, so they can't be surrounded. So they retreat, the army kind of follows them. They retreat again, the army follows them. Now the armies kind of expect them to kind of keep retreating. Okay, they keep retreating, but suddenly they turn around and they attack. So you got this, we've got this kind of army, this very, very small army that's charging into the midst of the Byzantines. Okay, and the army is led by Sayyidina Zayd. Zayd is kind of holding the banner. Now at the same time, simultaneously at the same time, the Prophet ﷺ is sitting in Medina on the minbar. Okay, kind of the earth rolls itself up. So the Prophet ﷺ is sitting on the minbar in Masjid al-Nabawi with his companions around him, and he's giving them kind of like a blow-by-blow account of the battle. He's effectively commentating on the battle. It's like, there goes Zayd, banner in his hand. Okay, Zayd is charged at the army. He's still holding the banner. Okay, so remember, so what happens is that Zayd goes in attacking with the banner in hand. So he doesn't hand the banner over to someone else, because out of the respect, the honor he gives, because the Prophet ﷺ handed him the banner. So he holds on to the banner. So it's in one hand, so he's attacking okay, with the banner in hand. And then actually what happens in battles is wherever the banner is, that's where you got the kind of most fierce fighting taking place, because you want to kind of capture the banner almost. Like that's what it comes down to. It's about your honor as well, and it's like putting the other side down. If you capture the banner, that's like embarrassing for them. Okay, so he held onto the banner and he went off, and he's attacking. And then Sayyidina Zayd is wounded, got many wounds. Okay, and Sayyidina Zayd, and this is again the Prophet I'm describing, Zayd has been slain. Okay, so you can imagine this. The Prophet is witnessing this. His family, he took him as a child. Okay, remember the story? He took him as a child. He was gifted as on his wedding. He was gifted as a servant slave. His Sayyidina Zayd's father, real father and uncle, came when they finally found him, found out who he was, where he was, and they came. And the Prophet ﷺ said to both his father, it's up to him. And Zayd says that there's no chance I will leave this man. The Prophet ﷺ, there's no chance I'll leave this man. And they were saying to him, look, he's freeing you. He's giving you the option. You can go off and be a free person. He goes, no, I want to stay with him. The same Zayd. This is when the Prophet ﷺ held up his hand and said, you from now on, you're like a Zayd ibn Muhammad. But obviously later on he would say that, look, the Prophet ﷺ does not have any adopted sons, but still he was like a son to him. Okay, he was like a son to him. This same Zayd, and the Prophet ﷺ is witnessing this. Okay, Zayd, the only Sahaba to be mentioned by name in the Quran. Okay, Sayyidina Aisha radhiyallahu anha narrated that never did the Prophet ﷺ send Sayyidina Zayd on an expedition, but he would lead it. So he was never number two. Okay, and she said that had he been alive, so had Zayd been alive, Sayyidina Zayd been alive, he would have been appointed the first Khalifa. And then this is coming from Sayyidina Aisha, who is the daughter of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, who was actually appointed the first Khalifa. This is coming from Sayyidina Aisha. This is such a high regard that they had for Sayyidina Zayd. The Prophet ﷺ is witnessing this. He's been slain. Okay, the banner kind of goes back, and it reaches who then? Sayyidina Jafar. And the Prophet they describe Jafar has taken up the banner. Okay, and again, he's been struck, he's been wounded. Okay, now when it came to the fighting of Sayyidina Jafar, it was one of the most vicious ever recorded. Okay, such bravery. And we're going to cover a few hadiths, obviously, about the wounds, etc. We'll do that later on. But it was such bravery. He's in the thick of the battle, and what happens is actually someone cuts the legs of his horse, so he kind of falls down, and then he's kind of surrounded, but he's there still fighting, sustaining many wounds. Eventually someone cuts his hand. Okay, his hand has been cut off, but he's holding the banner in his other hand. So then what they do is they cut off his other hand, so he kind of, and then he picks up the banner, with his stumps. The thing is, no hands, but like this, he's holding the banner, okay, with stumps of his arm, okay. And then what happens is, Jafar, he's slain, martyred. And I think some of the description is that someone from the back, really almost like cuts him. Okay. Now what happens is that, and the Prophet again is describing when he's sitting there, he said, now Abdullah has taken up the banner. And he starts, so when I say describing, obviously I'm adding in additional parts from maybe some other this. So it's not necessarily this is the long hadith that the Prophet is describing. Okay, but again, the hadith comes about that the Prophet is describing the battle. But so I'm just kind of combining the two at the moment. So now the Prophet Abdullah has taken up, and I'll narrate one of the hadiths actually when he says about the Prophet. Okay, now Abdullah has taken up the banner, and kind of he has charged into the enemy, and kind of this in Arabic is called it's kind of to kind of throw yourself into the ranks of the enemy. Okay, throw yourself into the ranks of the enemy. So Sayyidina Abdullah is also slain. Okay, so Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Rawaha was actually, as I mentioned before, was a poet. and some say that he was probably he was better than Hassan ibn Thabit. Okay, well, definitely more pious, but he was not as famous a poet as Hassan ibn Thabit, because obviously he died at an earlier age. Okay, another famous incident involving him was when the Prophet ﷺ giving khutbah. He was giving a khutbah, and there was a delegation that had come to see the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ was giving a khutbah, and he says a delegation. He says to them to sit down. As I kind of sit down, and we'll kind of speak later. But he says sit down. At that same time, so then Abdullah ibn Rawaha is entering the masjid, and all he hears was the Prophet ﷺ saying, sit down. He didn't know who he was saying to, whatever. Now he just heard that, and he heard the Prophet ﷺ sit down. So what does he do? There, he just sits down. Okay, subhanallah, he just sits down. The Prophet ﷺ looks at him and smiles and makes dua for him. Okay, and then obviously we mentioned a few weeks ago during the al-Qadha, when he was kind of coming out with all this poetry against Quraysh, and so Umar kind of stops him, but the Prophet ﷺ says, continue. We've covered that. But these are kind of a few of the incidents involving Abdullah ibn Rawaha. So then what happens is, now the Prophet ﷺ says, now the banner has been taken up by one of the swords of God, but by Saif means kind of Saif Allah, by one of the swords of God. In fact, it was Thabit who kind of picked. Actually, what happens is, so the Thabit kind of picks up the banner, and then he kind of goes back and regroups, calls everyone along, and he goes to Sayyidina Khalid, and he says to Sayyidina Khalid, here, take the banner, kind of lead us. Okay, he's saying to him, here, take the banner, lead us, and Sayyidina Khalid kind of refuses. No, remember, Sayyidina Khalid is a new Muslim. He's probably thinking, look, I'm fresh. It's fresh in everyone's mind. This guy, he's killed many of their companions, maybe fathers and sons, etc. This is Sayyidina Khalid, this great kind of leader who, up to this point, was against the Muslims. Leading these campaigns against the Muslims. Okay, so he knows that it'll probably be fresh in people's mind. I can't lead them. I'm just a new Muslim. So he doesn't want to overstep his mark. So he says, he goes to Thabit, you have the banner. But Thabit says to him, no, I only took the banner to give it to you. You lead us. So what happens is Thabit kind of gathers the other Sahaba, and he says to them, do you guys have any problem of Khalid leading us, taking the banner? And they were all kind of pleased if, say, the Khalid leads them, he takes the banner, because they knew how good a general he is. Okay, so what happens is Khalid takes the banner. Okay, so it needs the Muslims, the Muslim rank together, and he kind of beats retreat and orderly retreat into the valley of Mu'ta. So what happens is the Muslims make this orderly retreat, right? Okay, so each time kind of was called a kind of a feint, which means that they kind of charge to attack, then they withdraw. They charge to attack, then they withdraw. So the enemy are never kind of sure are they going to be attacking, or they're going to they're kind of moving back. So eventually kind of successfully managed to take them back into the retreat into the mountains. Now another kind of thing that's mentioned is that he also used the archers, so started to fire away with the archers. So the other army had to kind of eventually retreating back. There was a kind of big distance between them, of the distance of the archers where the arrows could reach. Now there are some narrations actually that this kind of happens around for 5 days. These are kind of just that one day. Okay. Another tactic, say, the Khalid did was he swapped the fighters. Okay, so what happened is that those that were fighting at the front would swap with those at the back. The left would swap with those on the right. Okay, so the impression was that new troops are arriving. When fires were lit, kind of each person lit a fire. Normally you have 10-20 people around a fire, but not here. So again, the impression was that there was a lot more troops than actual happening. Another thing was some of the fighters, did get them kind of kind of creating a bit of a wind with the shield or whatnot. That would kind of build up dust Okay, so from far it would seem like, more reinforcements are coming. Okay, more reinforcements were coming. So, okay, so the Byzantines were confused. They're thinking, well, what's happening here? How could we not defeat 3,000? So they thought there must be reinforcements coming, because surely 3,000 was nothing. We could easily defeat them. So saying that Khalid was applying these kind of divergent tactics, basically creating a ghost army, once again making it seem like the army was so large, spreading them out, attacking different places at different times of the day. So the Byzantines were just perplexed. They're just thinking, what are we fighting? What are we fighting here? So he managed to succeed in creating this distance between the two armies, and this distance was kind of increasing. This is what Sayyidina Khalid wanted. Eventually the Byzantines also, they begin to retreat as they do not want to lose any more men. Okay, and this again was what Sayyidina Khalid wanted. It was a point, obviously, they kind of paused as well, because they thought reinforcements were coming, and this was the kind of window that they required for to then retreat back. Because obviously if they had just retreated in front of them, then they would just chase them. Okay, they would chase them and then again attack again. But here the army kind of paused, and we're not talking about little individuals, we're talking large armies, so they move in some kind of fashion. Okay, they move in a certain way. Okay, now so the Khalid said that on the day of Mu'tah, 9 swords were broken in my hand, and only a Yemenite sword of mine remained in my hand, in Sahih Bukhari. Okay, so again, the Khalid's maneuver was so successful that other than those 3 martyrs, that the leaders that we spoke about, the Muslims only lost further 5 soldiers. Okay, so 8 Muslims were martyred. There's other narrations that say 12 or around about that, but very small number. So not even 1%. Okay, not even 1%. So now the army are a month's march away. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ goes to the house of Sayyidina Ja'far, and he says to his wife, bring to me Ja'far's children. Okay, and she says, Ya Rasulullah, because she sees the tone of his voice. She says, Ya Rasulullah, has Allah shown you something? And he says, indeed, Ja'far has been martyred. Okay, Ja'far has been martyred, and he holds Ja'far's sons, and he weeps and he weeps. Okay, so Asma, the widow of Ja'far, says to the Prophet ﷺ, who will take care of them? Okay, who will take care of them? And the Prophet ﷺ replies that you're worried about poverty. I am their wali. I am the wali in this world and the next. And obviously we mentioned about Sayyidina Asma, who then later on gets married to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. And after the death of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq to Sayyidina Ali, remember we showed those the chart of the believing sisters. Okay, it's one of them, and I covered it on that. Okay, and from actually some of these things that we learn, these events, some of the sunnah obviously we learn with the Prophet ﷺ tells those around that cook some food for the family of Ja'far, as in like basically something's happened. So again, it's a sunnah that if someone passes away, its sunnah is to those around, they should be cooking the food. Okay, it's something that we've unfortunately lost here. So it's a case of those that are grieving, or those someone passed away, it's almost on them all the time. Oh, someone's going to come, you need to make food, this and that. It shouldn't be the way, but then that's how kind of we do things now. Okay, from the family side, obviously they about that fact that no one should leave without any food. But again, the responsibility, the sunnah way is the responsibility lies on those around. Okay, those around, not the family who's mourning. Okay, and again, also is that mourning is for 3 days. And the Prophet ﷺ comes after 3 days, and he puts things back into order. It says clean up the kids, comb the hair, cut their hair, etc., because they look a mess and all that. So again, I think in Arab countries, like if you go to visit someone, if you go after 3 days for this, for condolences, they get a bit offended. Okay, they get a bit offended. So from there, and then what he does is he goes into the house of Sayyidina Zayd, and he gives them the news in the same way. And as he is leaving, Sayyidina Zayd's young daughter runs after him and throws herself into his arms, and he holds her in the middle of the street, and he's kneeling down. He's holding her and he's weeping. He's weeping for Zayd, and some of the Sahaba saw him, and they said, Ya Rasulullah, what is this? And the Prophet ﷺ says, this is yearning for the ones you love. This is the grief of separation. Okay, and that night the Prophet ﷺ sees the martyrs of Mu'tah, and he sees Sayyidina Jafar. He sees Sayyidina Jafar with wings, like the wings of an angel. So his hands were cut off, but that was replaced by wings. Okay, wings, and Jafar flies to him and gives him salam, and then the Prophet ﷺ, the next morning, he goes to the house of Jafar's widow and he explains, he tells her that the dream that he had, and that's why Jafar is known as the Jafar. Is known as Jafar Jafar at-Tayyar, right? Jafar the winged. Okay, Jafar the winged. So again, Abdullah ibn Umar who said that I was present among them in the battle, and we searched for Jafar ibn Abi Talib and found his body among the bodies of the martyred ones, and found over 90 wounds over his body caused by stabs or shots of arrow. 90 wounds. Okay, and one of the narrations is that 50 wounds, and they were at the front. Okay, so he's like full on front on, he was facing people, wound after wound after wound, but he continued. Okay, he continued. And also narrated by Amir, who whenever Ibn Umar greeted the son of Jafar, he used to say to him, Assalamu alayka, of the son of two-winged person. Okay, son of two-winged person. Let me just quickly show you a few images of what kind of modern Mu'tah. Okay, here's the first image. Again, like I said, this is modern day Jordan. And also what you have is the kind of maqam, the tombs. Some of the tombs, so you got the tomb of Sayyidina Zayd. Okay, of Sayyidina Jafar. And Sayyidina Abdullah. Again, they're all within the locality. Okay. Okay, so now what happens is this army comes back to Medina. Okay, eventually comes back to Medina, and people now, because the Prophet has explained exactly what happened, and although some kind of come out with that initially when they're coming in, they're kind of jeered, etc. I don't think that probably would have been the case. But so they came in, I suppose they would have got this kind of hero's welcome that should have been, because the point here was what the purpose of Sayyidina Khalid was that he knew that the kind of victory for them was the fact that they need to get out of that place. Okay, survive. Okay, they need to survive, and he did whatever he had to do to survive. So you're facing this great army, and less than kind of 1% have been martyred. So you got to see that as a like the fact that they kind of got out of there. Okay, they got out of there. Now, what happens is, well, the likelihood is, the Prophet does not see. He sees the wife of one of the Sahaba that was in the battle, and says, "I've not seen him for a few days." And she goes out, "Oh, he's not leaving his house," because of all the rumors that are going around and people accusing him. They're saying, "Oh, fleers." So they're saying, "Ya furar," "Oh, fleers, you fled. You fled from the battle." And the Prophet hears about this, and he says, "Lays al furar bal qurrar." So he kind of changes the word. Okay, he changes one letter from furar to qurrar. Qurrar is to retreat and then to come back around again. So they are saying, you fled. And the Prophet says, in other words, no, none of those who ran away, they lived to kind of fight another day. Okay, that's what the Prophet says. Because remember, there were Quranic verses revealed about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala detests those who flee from battle. So this is about those who show cowardice in battle. But the Prophet said that these are not these people. Okay, they're not deserters. They're not deserters. No, they have saved themselves so they can fight on another day. They have extricated themselves from a kind of hopeless situation, And this is the point, this is a kind of lesson, kind of got out of this hopeless situation, one where they had no chance of winning. So they had, that it was, they could build up their strength and return to fight again and again. There's a lesson here that you got to keep your long-term goal in mind. You may lose the battle, but aim to win the war. Okay, yeah. Rather than this kind of act of kind of defiance, I'm going to fight. Although those companions were very brave, they sacrificed themselves, but the Prophet ﷺ's approval was shown to those who kind of retreated in an orderly manner. And again, this is the Prophet ﷺ's teaching the companions how to interpret the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in context. Okay, so what it is, they took the general statement: people who flee from battle are cursed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is angry with those who flee from battle. You fled from battle, hence Allah is angry with you. No, the Prophet ﷺ said no. Context is important. The context here is really important. Okay. So this is the story, and so Khalid ibn Walid was honored for this ordered retreat and stalemating his opponent, kind of outnumbered them, whatever 51 at least, basically. Okay, so this is where the Khalid ibn Walid got his name, Saifullah, the sword of God. It was given to him by the Prophet ﷺ at the Battle of Mu'atta. Now, there's actually some, because it was against the Romans, so there's actually some, it was recorded in their side as well, because this particular event, although there's a lot of things that are kind of wrong in it, but still the fact that they recorded. And one of the things they mention is that they survived then, or they got out because of one of the leaders, the general whose name was Khalid, who was known as the Sword of God. So they called him that Sword of God, so that the word kind of got there. But what this also did was that now, the Romans kind of knew as well, there's something, there's someone there, there's Muslims there, and kind of the northern side as well now had to be wary. Okay. It kind of stuff like the Muslims are around now. We have to be careful, and they kind of showed a glimpse of what it is that they're capable of, because they were surprised, because they, you got this attitude of all these shepherds, these Bedouin Arabs, they don't have no clue. But then you got this mastery of, say, the Khalid. He kind of fooled them. All this kind of what he did. They saw themselves as being these great, tacticians, but he kind of fooled them in everything. Okay, a few hadiths and kind of actually let's go through this one. I'm going to mention a few. There was actually a really long one in Heraclius hadith when he met with Abu Sufyan, but obviously we've already covered it, so I won't cover that again. So we mentioned assigning the commander. Okay, I've already mentioned quite a few of these, the 2-winged one and Sayyidina Jafar being slain. There's actually a thing that happened, and so Amra who said, I heard Sayyidina Aisha saying, when the news of the killing of Ibn Haritha, Jafar ibn Abi Talib and Abdullah ibn Rawaha arrived, the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sat down with sorrow apparent in him. So he just sat down, like when we hear it's sad news, we just sit down, can't take it. So the Prophet ﷺ just sat down. So the Aisha added, I was peeping through a gap in the door when a man came to him and said, O Messenger of Allah, the women of Jafar, and mentioned their crying. He told him to forbid them to do so. So when you say crying, it's like, like this wailing that we have, this like, and I've mentioned this so many times, it almost becomes a competition. Oh, what I'm going to do now, or what's going to happen now, and this and that, it's like that's forbidden. Okay. It's unfortunate. Well, I'm just trying to think here. So it would happen a lot. So when I grew up, it's happened a lot. Now, maybe I've not come across it because I'm not, you're probably not there to hear or whatnot. So the ladies will probably know better. But yeah, this is forbidden. When you go over the top, there, wailing and all that. The Prophet ﷺ did not allow that. Anyway, so this messenger comes and he says to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ says that, stop them, tell them not to, okay? Forbid them to do so. So the man went away and then he returned saying, I forbade them, but they did not listen to me. He ordered him to go again. He went again and came back. By Allah, they overpowered me. She claimed that the Messenger of Allah said, go and throw dust into the man. Meaning, what can I do then? And so that Aisha then says, I said to the man, may Allah put your nose in the dust. By Allah, neither have you done what you have been ordered, nor have you relieved the Messenger of Allah from trouble. So it's like a case of, she's saying to the Messenger, there's like a time and place. He's grieving here, and you're coming along here. The women are crying basically. What should I do? And obviously he has to then tell them what to do, because this is the sunnah. So even though he's grieving, he has to give the right answer. And again, for us, it's on a different, I suppose. Like, unless you're kind of one of the family members, you can probably speak out then. But then an outsider coming along when someone is in grieving, someone's passed away, you're trying to then teach them the Sharia. Oh, no, don't do this, don't do that. You got to understand the situation. Whereas if it's like a family member, they say it's a different thing, because they're also grieving as much as well. So that's a kind of a different thing. Sorry, I've just realized the time, but we're almost about to finish. Just a few hadiths that I was checking on, inshallah. Okay, so this was a kind of one of those events that she said, she got angry at him to say, it's almost like there's a time and place, neither have you done what he told you to do, and now he's coming back and you're not, helping him out as well. Okay, we leave it at that. There's a few more I just want to mention, and then we'll stop at that. So the Prophet had informed the people of the martyrdom of Zayd, and this is when he says, the Prophet said, Zayd took the flag as the commander of the army and was martyred. Then Jafar took it and was martyred. Then Ibn Rawaha took it and was martyred. At that time, the Prophet's eyes were shedding tears. He added, then the flag was taken by a sword among the swords of Allah. Okay, so what actually this particular narration, so we finish up on this. This is the final hadith I wanted to mention. So narrated Anas. Already I'll just read it again basically, and I'll tell you why I want to finish off this. The Prophet had informed the people of the martyrdom of Zayd, Jafar and Ibn Rawaha. Before the news of their death reached, the Prophet said, Zayd took the flag and was martyred. Then Jafar took it and was martyred. Then Ibn Rawaha took it and was martyred. At that time, the Prophet's eyes were shedding tears. He added, then the flag was taken by a sword amongst the swords of Allah, i.e. Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid. And Allah made them, i.e. the Muslims, victorious. Okay, say Bukhari, they're victorious. And this is why I want to mention this, because you have this thing of, it was a loss. Okay, they left, they ran away, etc. You can say whatever you want to say. But what's enough for you? So even if you've got any doubts about it, but wait a minute, they had to leave, whatnot, there was this big army, but they ran back. The survival, you can't call it a victory or whatnot. The words of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ calls it a victory. Okay, so he says the flag was taken by a sword among the swords of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Khalid ibn Walid, and Allah made them victorious. Words of the Prophet ﷺ calling this victory. That should be enough for us. Okay, that should be enough for us. There's victory. Okay, and I wanted to finish off on that. So if there's kind of any doubts, wait a minute, you got this way, that way. Yes, you can analyze it as much as possible. This happened, that happened. But all we need at the end of it are the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's the battle of Mu'tah. Inshallah, it's been beneficial. Again, it is one of those that is not mentioned a lot. Okay. But it was important in the sense that you have these big personalities, the family of the Prophet ﷺ that passed away. Okay. And he was so grieved about it. So inshallah it's been beneficial. So we leave it at that, and inshallah we'll continue. Kind of one big main event now is left. We're getting kind of close to that now, and it's actually in this year that we're in now that the event takes place. But let's see what other things that we need to fit in here and there, and see how far we go. Because I'm just trying to work it out now. We've probably got 6 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, 5, maybe 6 weeks till Ramadan. So we're cutting it close. I don't know if I'll be able to complete it by then, but let's see where we get to, inshallah. Next week we'll touch a bit about, because getting close to 27th of Rajab, okay, which according to some scholars was the date for the night of Miraj, Isra Miraj. So we'll just touch a bit about on that. But anyone that wants to kind of watch the full detail, the video, the kind of class I did on it will be on the channel, inshallah. So you can watch it from there. It is, I would definitely recommend watching it, because it is, good. It's something that we should tell our children about. Okay, it's a miraculous event took place, and something such greatness it was. So we should definitely mention it. We should know about it first ourselves, and then kind of mention it to our kids. Okay, we leave it at that. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.